Imagine this. It's Monday morning. Your alarm goes off, and before your feet even touch the floor, you're already thinking about work. You get ready, sit in traffic, spend 8 or 9 hours working, come home exhausted, pay your bills, and tell yourself you're doing everything right. After all, that's what we've been taught, isn't it? Work hard, save money, stay out of debt, be responsible. And for a while, it feels like you're making progress. Maybe your savings account slowly grows. Maybe you get a raise every year. Maybe you've even started investing a little. But then something strange happens. You look back 5 years, maybe even 10. And despite all that effort, your financial life doesn't look dramatically different. You're not broke, but you're not financially free either. Meanwhile, you see other people buying businesses, investing in assets, and building wealth at a pace that seems almost unfair. So what's going on? Here's the thing. Most people believe money is earned through hard work alone, but that's only part of the story. The uncomfortable truth is that many hardworking people are stuck because they're playing a financial game using rules that were never designed to make them wealthy. Schools teach us how to become employees. They teach math, history, and science, but they rarely teach how wealth is actually created. Rich parents do, and the lessons they pass down often change the entire financial future of their children. Today, we're going to uncover 15 money secrets wealthy families teach at home that schools almost never discuss. And some of them may completely change the way you think about money forever. The first lesson rich parents teach their children is surprisingly simple. Income is not wealth, and yet most people spend their entire lives acting as if those two things are exactly the same. Think about it. When someone says they're successful, what's the first question people usually ask? How much do they make? Not how much they own. Not how much they invest, not how much freedom they have, just how much they earn. Look, a person earning $300,000 a year can still be drowning in car payments, credit card bills, and an expensive lifestyle they can't actually afford. At the same time, someone earning $70,000 a year could be quietly investing, building assets, and growing their net worth year after year. One looks rich, the other is becoming rich, and there's a huge difference between those two things. Here's what most people don't realize. Wealth isn't measured by the money flowing into your bank account. It's measured by the assets you own and the financial security you've built. That's why wealthy families teach their children to focus on net worth instead of income. Because income can disappear, a job can be lost, a business can struggle, but assets continue working long after the paycheck stops. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. Most people believe saving money is enough, and saving is important. But saving alone has limits. Imagine you save $500 every month for 30 years. That's $180,000. Not bad. But if that same $500 is invested every month and earns an average annual return of 8%, it could grow to roughly $745,000. The difference isn't how hard you worked. The difference is what your money was doing while you slept. Rich parents understand that money should have a job. Every dollar should either protect wealth, grow wealth, or create future opportunities. Because the goal isn't just earning money. The goal is building a financial machine that eventually earns money without your constant effort. And that's the moment when income starts turning into real wealth. Now, this is where the conversation starts to separate people who simply earn money from people who build lasting wealth. Most people spend their lives focused on one question. How can I make more money? And on the surface, that sounds like a smart goal. But wealthy families often teach a different question. How can I create cash flow? At first, those questions seem similar. They're not. Making money usually requires your time. Cash flow continues even when you're not working. Think about it. Every month, bills show up whether you feel like working or not. Rent or mortgage payments, utilities, insurance, groceries. The financial game isn't won when you earn a large paycheck. It's won when your assets generate enough income to cover your expenses. That's why rich parents teach ownership from an early age. Ownership of stocks that pay dividends, ownership of businesses that generate profits, ownership of real estate that produces rental income, ownership of intellectual property that earns royalties. Here's what most people don't realize. The wealthiest people in the world didn't become wealthy because they worked the most hours. They became wealthy because they owned assets that continued producing value long after the work was done. Imagine two people. One works 50 hours every week to earn $5,000 a month. The other owns assets that generate $5,000 a month, regardless of whether they work that week. Both receive the same amount of money, but only one has true financial freedom. This is where it gets really interesting. Every asset you acquire becomes a tiny employee working for you. One asset may not seem like much, but over time, dozens of assets begin producing income simultaneously. And eventually, you reach a point where your money starts working harder than you do. That's the moment wealthy people are aiming for. Not more work, not bigger paychecks, but sustainable cash flow that creates freedom, flexibility, and control over their lives. Now, you might be thinking, wait a minute, aren't we always told that debt is bad? And honestly, that's what most people believe. From a young age, we're taught to avoid debt at all costs. We hear stories about people trapped by credit cards, loans, and financial stress. So naturally, many people grow up assuming that all debt is dangerous. But wealthy families often teach a more nuanced lesson. They don't ask, is debt good or bad? They ask, what is this debt buying? And that question changes everything. Look, not all debt is created equal. Let's imagine two people each borrow $20,000. The first person uses the money to buy a luxury vacation, expensive electronics, and things that lose value almost immediately. A year later, the debt remains, but the money is gone. The second person uses that same $20,000 to start a small business, purchase equipment, or acquire an asset that generates income. Now the debt is helping create future cash flow. Same amount borrowed. Completely different outcome. This is where it gets really interesting. Rich parents teach their kids to separate debt into two categories: consumer debt and productive debt. Consumer debt usually makes you poorer. Productive debt has the potential to make you wealthier. Of course, productive debt still carries risk. Nothing is guaranteed, but the wealthy understand that avoiding all debt can sometimes mean avoiding opportunities as well. The real danger isn't debt itself. The real danger is borrowing money for things that don't improve your financial future. Because every dollar of debt should have a purpose. And the people who understand that distinction often make far better financial decisions over the long run. That's why wealthy families focus less on the debt and more on what the debt is actually helping them build. Most people think building wealth is difficult because they don't earn enough money. But surprisingly, one of the biggest obstacles to wealth isn't low income. It's something far more subtle, something that quietly grows every time your paycheck grows. It's called lifestyle inflation, and it destroys more wealth than most people realize. Here's how it usually happens. You get a raise at work. Maybe it's an extra $500 a month. At first, you're excited. You tell yourself you're finally getting ahead financially, but then little upgrades start appearing. A nicer apartment, a newer car, a more expensive phone, more dinners out, better vacations. None of these purchases seem unreasonable on their own. In fact, they often feel deserved. After all, you've worked hard for them. But when your spending rises at the same pace as your income, something strange happens. Your lifestyle improves, but your financial position barely changes. 5 years later, you're earning significantly more than before, yet you still feel like you're living paycheck to paycheck. This is where it gets really interesting. Rich families understand a concept called opportunity cost. Every dollar spent today is a dollar that loses the chance to grow tomorrow. Imagine spending $500 on things you won't even remember next year. Now imagine investing that same $500 every month for decades. The difference can become hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's why many wealthy people don't immediately upgrade their lifestyle every time they earn more money. They upgrade their assets first. They buy investments before buying luxuries. They increase ownership before increasing consumption, because they understand a powerful truth. Looking rich and becoming rich are not the same thing. And the people who consistently choose long-term wealth over short-term status often end up achieving both. At this point, you might think building wealth is mostly about numbers, learning how to invest, understanding interest rates, calculating returns. And while those things matter, they're not what usually determines success. Because money is rarely a math problem. It's a behavior problem. Here's what most people don't realize. Two people can have access to the exact same financial information and still end up with completely different outcomes. Why? Because human emotions often overpower logic. Take loss aversion, for example. Psychologists have found that people tend to feel the pain of losing money much more intensely than the pleasure of gaining it. That's why many investors panic during market crashes. They see their investments drop in value and immediately sell, hoping to avoid further losses. But in doing so, they often lock in those losses permanently. Then there's instant gratification. Your brain naturally wants rewards now, not 10 years from now. That's why buying a new phone today feels more exciting than investing the same money for the future. The problem is that small decisions made repeatedly over time create enormous consequences. This is where it gets really interesting. The wealthy understand that financial success isn't about making one perfect decision. It's about consistently avoiding emotional mistakes. They create systems instead of relying on willpower. They automate investments. They follow long-term plans. And they avoid making major financial decisions when they're afraid, excited, or under pressure. Because they know something most people learn too late. The biggest threat to your wealth isn't the market. It isn't inflation. And it isn't even a recession. The biggest threat is often the person staring back at you in the mirror. When you learn to control your emotions, you gain the ability to make rational decisions, even when everyone else is reacting emotionally. And that's a massive financial advantage. Rich parents teach their children something that most people don't fully appreciate until much later in life. Time is the most valuable asset you'll ever own. Not money, not talent, not even intelligence. Time. Because unlike money, once it's gone, you can never earn it back. And nowhere is this more obvious than in the power of compounding. Imagine two friends. The first starts investing at age 22. The second waits until age 32 because they think they'll invest once they're earning more money. At first, the difference doesn't seem important. 10 years isn't that long, right? But those early years are exactly where the magic happens. The first investor gives their money more time to grow, earn returns, and then earn returns on those returns. Year after year, the gap gets larger. Eventually, the person who started earlier can end up with significantly more wealth, even if they invested less money overall. This is where it gets really interesting. Most people underestimate how powerful small actions become when repeated over long periods of time. A few $100s invested consistently may not seem life-changing today, but over decades, it can become hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars. Now let's talk about risk. Most people think risk means losing money, and that's partly true. But wealthy investors often define risk differently. To them, risk is not understanding what you're doing. Keeping all your money in cash may feel safe, but inflation quietly reduces its purchasing power every year. Avoiding investments may feel comfortable, but it can also mean missing decades of growth. The wealthy understand that every choice carries risk. The goal isn't to avoid risk completely. The goal is to understand it, manage it, and use it wisely. Because when you combine patience, compounding, and intelligent risk-taking, time becomes your greatest financial ally. And that's a lesson worth learning as early as possible. Many people assume that becoming wealthy is the hardest part. But rich families understand something that most people overlook. Making money and keeping money are two completely different skills. In fact, history is full of people who earned fortunes and then lost everything. Professional athletes, lottery winners, celebrities, business owners. The problem wasn't earning money. The problem was managing it. Here's what most people don't realize. The wealthy spend just as much time thinking about preservation as they do about growth. They understand taxes, they understand cash flow, they understand asset allocation, and they understand the importance of building systems that continue working even when they aren't. For example, imagine two people who each earn $200,000 a year. One spends nearly everything they make and relies entirely on their job. The other invests consistently, owns income-producing assets, and structures their finances efficiently. 10 years later, their financial lives may look completely different. This is where it gets really interesting. Rich people don't just work harder, they build systems that work harder. They create businesses with employees. They own investments that generate income. They build networks that create opportunities. And they develop habits that make smart financial decisions automatic. Another lesson wealthy families teach is that relationships matter. Many opportunities in life come through people. A new business partnership, a better investment opportunity, a career-changing introduction. These things often happen because of strong networks, not luck. The wealthy understand that success is rarely achieved alone. Over time, all of these advantages begin to stack on top of each other. Better habits, better systems, better opportunities. And that's why wealth often grows slowly at first, then accelerates dramatically. Because once the right systems are in place, money starts working harder than the person who earned it. And that's how the wealthy stay wealthy across generations. After everything we've talked about in this video, you might expect the biggest money secret to be about investing, or building a business, or finding the perfect financial strategy. But the truth is much simpler than that. The biggest money secret wealthy parents teach their children is that money itself is not the goal. Freedom is. Think about it. Most people spend years chasing bigger paychecks, believing that more money will automatically make them happier. But here's what most people don't realize. Money is only valuable because of what it allows you to do. It gives you choices. The choice to spend more time with your family. The choice to live where you want. The choice to leave a job you hate. The choice to pursue opportunities without constantly worrying about survival. This is where it gets really interesting. Many wealthy people eventually discover that the things they value most cannot be bought directly. Time, peace of mind, meaningful relationships, good health, purpose. Money can support those things, but it cannot replace them. That's why truly wealthy families teach their children to see money as a tool rather than a destination. A tool that creates security. A tool that creates flexibility. A tool that creates freedom. Look, you don't need rich parents to learn these lessons. You don't need a six-figure income. And you certainly don't need to be a financial genius. What you need is consistency, because wealth is rarely built through one brilliant decision. It's built through hundreds of small decisions made correctly over and over again. Choosing to invest instead of consume. Choosing patience over impulse. Choosing long-term freedom over short-term comfort. Those choices may seem small today, but over years they can completely transform your financial future. And that's the real lesson. The goal was never just to make more money. The goal was always to build a life where money gives you more control, more opportunities, and ultimately, more freedom. And once you understand that, you stop chasing money and start making money work for you.